This is now the third time I'm shooting this video. I had originally planned to make this video about just sim racing equipment and the state of sim racing games on PC and why it might actually be a good moment to enter the hobby compared to say 4 or 5 years ago. And to be honest, I still believe that premise to be true. However, to actually enjoy sim racing on PC, you will of course first need a PC. And as it is quite graphically demanding, you will need a pretty beefy PC as well. And simply put, due to the worldwide economic situation currently, it has simply become much more expensive to build a decent gaming PC to enjoy sim racing. And that really bothers me, because in terms of sim racing equipment, wheelbases, pedals, you name it, we are in a golden age, I believe. No longer are there just 1 or 2 brands offering high-grade stuff. Direct drive wheelbases and loadcellpedals have basically become the norm, and you can pick up such a set for a very reasonable price these days. However, the recent price increases that we have seen for PC parts recently make it so that if you are coming from console or don't already have a PC or just have a laptop for example, because of the AI hype bubble, getting a GPU, some RAM, an SSD will be extremely expensive. And then there is another problem. Developers of modern titles are essentially forcing you to keep buying new gear in order to run at decent frame rates, simply because the optimization over the years has become less and less important. It is now practically expected of you to have a 16GB graphics card in order to properly run their games. And that leaves us in a very weird position where there is a plethora of amazing sim racing titles on PC. Sim racing equipment has basically become democratized in the sense that it has become much more affordable than it previously used to be. But because modern sim racing titles have become graphically more and more demanding, which essentially forces you to buy recent, high-grade PC components, and especially those have become way more expensive over the last few years. And to be honest, I think that is a big problem. If you can buy a nice 5090 for yourself, all the power to you, I hope you enjoy it and I hope you get nice frame rates. But there are many people who can simply not afford to spend 2000 euros on a graphics card. And of course I'm not saying that you need a 5090, but from what I have seen, running games on a modern resolution of 1440p at a nice frame rate of around 90 will legit require you to get an RX 9070 XT or something, which basically is a 700 euro or dollar graphics card. So, let's start off with the PC. If you are coming from a console and you have never built a PC before, it might be very tempting to just buy a pre-build. I would highly recommend not to do this, as simply put, they will sell you products of a lesser quality for a higher price, and very often they are misconfigured too. So instead, let's just go over which parts you will actually need to build a fully working PC ready to go sim racing. Of course, every PC needs a motherboard, and so does ours, so that will be the first part we will be selecting later on. Second of all, we have the CPU. The CPU has to be compatible with your motherboard and vice versa, so we will be selecting the motherboard and the CPU together. And then, as sim racing is still a game, we will need a GPU, or in other words a graphics card, in order to actually draw the graphics on screen. This will be the biggest cost for the build, but it will also have the biggest impact on your frame rate or how smooth the game is, and so it is often wise to overspend a little bit here. And then we have RAM, and as we cannot download it, we will have to buy it. And lastly, for the PC itself, we will need a power supply, an SSD to store the games on, and a case. And we might also need to get a monitor, but luckily those are dirt cheap these days, at least for an entry-level model. If you have the money and the space, owning an aluminium extrusion rig is in my opinion the nicest option. It's extremely stiff and very customizable. But I also used a wheel stand for a period of 2 years, and I have to say, if you buy a sturdy one, it is absolutely fine, even with a direct drive setup. Of course, if you get an aluminium extrusion rig, you will also need to buy a seat. If you buy a new seat, this will be pretty expensive at around 200 to 300 euros, but most of these seats are pretty much universal, so you can also get a cheap one from a used car on the second-hand market. Of course, you will also need a wheelbase, and we will be only covering direct drive wheelbases in this video, as in my opinion buying a belt or gear driven wheelbase is basically shooting yourself in the foot. You will always want to upgrade later on, but a good direct drive wheelbase will be pretty much future proof. And here the same thing counts, the second hand market is an extremely good option. If you have found your wheelbase, you will also need a wheel to attach to it, and preferably a set of load cell pedals. I would highly recommend just skipping the potentiometer pedals and just going for load cell pedals straight away, as these will be way more future proof. And most likely you will also need some mounting stuff, like a monitor mount, a seat slider and a seat bracket, and maybe some other accessories for your peripherals. And so now that we know what we will need to buy for this setup, let's actually go over the options that we have, where I will be recommending gear with a very high cost effectiveness. And while it won't allow you to play the most modern titles on epic quality with a 4K resolution, it will still allow you to play titles like iRacing, Assetto Corsa Competizione or Assetto Corsa the original one, maybe even a bit of Evo and Rally, Le Mans Ultimate, R-Factor 2, Race Room and a bunch of other games at 1080p or Full HD with a very decent frame rate of around 90. As for the wheelbases and the sim racing gear we will be using, only load saddle pedals and only direct drive wheelbases with 8 or more Nm of torque. This will hopefully give you the full experience sim racing has to offer you without breaking the bank, and also future-proofing you for the next couple of years. And so let's just dive into the gear selection. And for the motherboard, I am choosing the Asus Prime B650 Plus Wi-Fi, which is available for €135 here in the Netherlands. As you can see, it is an AM5 socket. It is in the ATX form factor, so you will have to keep that in mind. You cannot buy a micro ATX case. This is just like how big the motherboard itself is, and it uses the AMD B650 chipset, which is a bit older by now, but it will still serve you well with the CPU we are about to choose. A nice bonus with this motherboard is that it is 4 DDR5 slots, so you can choose to expand your RAM later on. And it both has a PCIe 4.0 M2 slot and a PCIe 5.0 M2 slot as well, so you can expand your storage with a quick NVMe or a less quick but cheaper NVMe, whichever you desire. And for the CPU, I am choosing the Ryzen 7700X. This is now one generation older, but it is still a very quick 8-core processor. And as you can see, this was once a 500 to 450 euro CPU, and we can now buy it new for 330. And if we are on the used market, which we can also check here, we can find some copies for $180 in box, which is, a very decent price. As you can see, it will have the AM5 socket, 8 cores, and it will have a power draw of around 105 watts. So that is something we will have to keep in mind when choosing the power supply. But even in 2025, this CPU is a very good choice, I would say. As for the graphics card, as we are essentially quite budget limited, I would very much personally look on the second-hand market to find a last generation GPU with at least 16 GB of RAM, as that will really future-proof you for the next couple of years. And here I found a nice example of a card which used to be sold at $390, and this guy just used it for light gaming and stuff, so no mining, no crazy stuff, no overclocking most likely. So at 265 euros, this is a very nice deal. And if we just take a look at the card itself, and as you can see, it's still quite a recent card. It has only been around for less than 2 years. It is still available in some stores as well. It has 16 gigabytes and it uses GDDR6, which is pretty quick. This card is getting pretty good reviews, it seems. So yeah, this is what I would pick personally. And as you can see, here it becomes painfully clear what I was talking about with the RAM prices. They are actually insane, and it is just bonkers how much they have risen in just a few months. Let's look at this. Just this price graph, look at it go. It went from $100 to now $200, no even more, 350 on average and 220 euros minimum. So yeah, the prices are just absolutely crazy for DDR5. But luckily, here in Europe, if we just go to 16 gigabytes, and yes, I am aware this will be the part that is not future-proof, but as we are on a budget, I would personally just choose something like this, as this is still available on Amazon, which will be, yeah, you know, you can always RMA it if it doesn't work. And it is like $73, which, yeah, is still a very fair price. If you really want 32 gigabytes of RAM, you can always buy 2 sets of this. But if you do so, be sure to get a motherboard with 4 memory slots as well. But as you can see, the economic situation is kind of driving us to this point, because as you can see, not many months ago, this RAM used to be 53 euros and now it is already 73 euros. Just imagine for the high-speed 32 gigabyte kits. They are extremely expensive, so I would very much hold on purchasing that. As the CPU we chose doesn't come with a cooler in the box, we will also need to buy a CPU cooler. Luckily these aren't extremely expensive, and there you can find one at around 40 euros. These will work just fine for a CPU that we chose. I have a bit of a beefier one in my personal PC, but I also have a CPU that uses a lot more power and it just works fine. As you can see, they are also very quiet, which is of course very nice. As for the power supply, it might be tempting to cheap out on this part, but I would highly recommend not to do it and buy it from a trusted brand like Silverstone, as these are pretty much guaranteed to last you a long time and they will not fry your motherboard and maybe your CPU as well. Trust me, it happened to me, it is very painful, you don't want it to happen. We will only need around 500 watts, I checked it on PC Parts Picker, that even recommends 400 watts, which I find a bit scary, but with 500 watts we should be just fine. And we have an 80 plus gold power efficiency rating, which will just serve us to keep the PSU nice and cool. And of course with the case you have quite a lot of choices here. You can go for a nice cheap one, which is well reviewed, or you can also choose to spend a bit more money and go for like a nice case like this. It is all up to you. For the price, I will be just choosing a price of 75 euros just to keep a nice average. And for the NVMe M2 SSD, it becomes painfully obvious again what is happening here on the global market, because as you can see, the prices are rising like crazy. Luckily, we can still get a 1 terabyte stick for a price of around $90, and 1 terabyte will be more than enough to install a bunch of different racing sims. For these M2 SSDs, they can degrade over time, so be sure to check the reviews and be sure to check it from a trustworthy. And this bit right here without heatsink, don't worry about that, as 99% of the time your motherboard will just come with a heatsink anyway. So yeah, as most likely has become obvious, even if we shop around for second-hand parts and look around for good deals, it's basically impossible to build a good gaming PC that is ready for sim racing for the next coming years for under $1,000. And trust me when I say that there used to be a period where you could build a very capable gaming PC for around 600 euros. But luckily, with the sim racing market now having become quite established, we can also look around for second-hand deals on that side of the market. Sim racing is not for everyone, so some people will either sell their equipment entirely, or some people will just upgrade their stuff over time and sell their old stuff. So if you look around carefully and in a smart way, there is a very high chance that you will be able to find a very nice deal. And so here I found a nice offer for a Fanatec C-Cell DD with the 8Nm booster kit. And it also has the McLaren GT3 steering wheel included, which in my opinion is a pretty nice steering wheel. He mentions in the article itself that he has already sold this wheel, so that is not included. But for 375 euros for the base, including the wheel, I think this is a very good deal. Especially considering he has the boost kit included as well. However, this base is still on quick release V1. This is not really a big problem, but maybe in the future this is something you will have to upgrade and this will cost a bit of money. And for the pedals, I got recommended these by Dan Suzuki. He has tried them, he really liked them, and for the price they are basically unbeatable, I would say. I haven't tried them personally, but legit, these are the pedals I am looking at buying for myself just to use in my own rig. So take my recommendation with a grain of salt, but do know that this is what I would choose myself as well. As for the rig itself, they are pretty much all very similar. There are many different brands and they're all very similarly priced. This one is 400 euros. Then we go to this one, it's also 400 euros from SimXPro. And then we go to this one, oh, it's having a sale, so it's 373. There are some differences here and there. I would highly recommend to look up some reviews yourself just to find out what suits you best. But in terms of pricing, I will just stick to 400 euros for the new price. You can of course also buy one of these used, but I would say that would be quite of a hassle because you would either have to disassemble it completely for the seller to ship it to you, or you would have to go and get it with your car, you know. So yeah, that's quite a lot of trouble to go through. Just buying a new one is pretty much worth it in my opinion. It will also be nice and shiny and it won't have any scratches. And for the seat I am choosing, you might be wincing a little bit now, but I think this seat will be extremely comfortable, and as you can see it does have some damage here and there. But you know, for just sitting on and actually using as a seat, this will serve more than fine. It will be extremely comfortable and it will be only 130 bucks, which if we compare it to like seats that are offered here are 330, 330, 350, 250, 220. So we do save quite a bit of money there. And lastly, we might need a few accessories like this Fanatec side mount, which is very nice to save a bit of space. We might want a shifter mount, we might want a monitor mount, etc. There is no way for me to really know exactly what you will need, so I will just put 200 euros into the budget for this. €2,260 just to get started with equipment that will last you a few years and that you will be happy with without wanting to upgrade in the next coming years. And even then it is quite suboptimal. The CPU will serve you very well, but the GPU is a bit old now, and the worst thing is this isn't even really a premium experience. This is truly just the cost of entry. Now I really don't want to be a doomer, and I will say that it has gotten much better in terms of sim racing equipment over the last couple of years, but as I have hopefully been able to show to you, the cost increases of PC components make it so that actually getting into the hobby now when you don't already have a PC is kind of cost prohibitive. And only by using the second-hand market we can actually find prices that will allow us to build a full setup that stays under 2,500 euros. If you are watching this and you don't have a lot of money, I can 100% understand if you are feeling a little bit discouraged currently, but please also know that you can buy and acquire this stuff over a period of time. You don't have to buy it all at once. And I guarantee you that if you look around a bit more carefully on the second-hand market, you'll give it a couple of weeks and you just really go out hunting for deals that you can shave another 260 euros off the final bill. And that would bring us down to a total cost of 2,000 euros, which is literally the exact price I paid for my Fanatec DD1, my Fanatec ClubSport 2.5 F1 PS4 edition wheel, and my ClubSport V3 pedals. Now it did also come with a Next Level Racing DD stand, which I used for a couple of years, But when I upgraded later on, I couldn't find a buyer for it and I just gave it away to a relative. So in that case, that money has just gone. And yes, I am aware that the DD1 has 20 Nm of torque, while the Wheelbase I recommended only has 8 Nm of torque. But I never ever use my Wheelbase above 10 Nm or more. Never ever. Very rarely do I actually use 10, and most of the time I'm just at 7. So, it's not all doom and gloom, but it is at least a bit worrying that the cost of entry into sim racing, at least for the PC that you will need to buy, is becoming more and more expensive. As a result, people are more likely to just stay on console, where they already have a games library, they already have the console, and if they want to upgrade to the next generation, it is most likely around 600 to 700 euros. Whereas on PC, just buying a decent GPU can cost you upwards of 700 euros. And I really hope this market overview will give you a better perspective and a better idea of whether you want to buy your stuff right now, you want to wait out a little bit, or maybe, you know what, you might find sim racing too expensive and you might even consider not doing it. All are of course valid options and I will not blame you for choosing any of them. Sim racing still is an expensive hobby at the end of the day, but hopefully with prices slowly still decreasing with the sim racing equipment, more and more people will enter the hobby. I have been OSW-Sim-Sports. Goodbye.